So welcome to the third show and tell for the Procurement Centre of Excellence project, now known as CEED, which we'll talk a bit more about during today's session. So I'm Corey Hughes, I'm Strategic Design Director for Parago, and we are working in partnership with our colleagues at Kershaw to deliver the alpha phase of this project, looking at new services to support procurement and commercial professionals in Wales. So today's format will be presentations from the team. And after each of us have presented, there'll be an opportunity to ask us some questions directly so that you keep that content fresh in your mind. And we'll also have time for an open discussion at the end of the session. We are here until 3, so we've got an hour. We'll see how we go. But obviously, as soon as we've finished, we can jump into some live discussion. So in the last show and tell, for those of you who weren't there or need a refresher, we covered an overview of the backlog of ideas we've been working on with the community and the results from the survey that we issued to help us prioritise the changes that we will work on for the remainder of this project. So to give some context, we are now in March. We are in the final few sprints of this alpha phase. So we are working at pace and we are getting hands-on into some of the detail and bringing to life the prioritised ideas that we have pulled out from all of the user testing and research sessions and engagement from the start of this project. Today, what we are going to cover off is a general update from myself. So I'll take you through what we've been up to over the last month or so. We are also going to be introducing Kirani, so my colleague Warren will be talking about that, which is a very exciting development in the service. And Angharad will be talking to us about the web presence for CEED. So again, lots of things to see today, which is exciting at this point in the project, which we've called Evolve, so bringing all of these ideas to life. So what have we been up to since we last saw you in January? Quite a lot. There's been lots of discussion. There's been a huge amount of engagement. Again, I've always said we once had people take a survey with us over Christmas, so we know how passionate you all are in the community to make sure that we get this right in Alpha. And we've built on that engagement to pick out some real opportunities to improve the user experience for folks in the community, whether you're at the start of your journey or a bit further on in your experience of procurement in Wales. So one of the things that we have heard from the community over and over again is that when it comes to one of the services, sharing best practice and training, it's not enough to have the best practice and training sitting detached from the procurement journey itself. So we are getting feedback that actually putting the context of the procurement journey alongside best practice, case studies and training is something that's going to be super valuable. And that was played out in our survey too, where we saw that actually rather than mapping the existing assets that are out there in the community, people are keen to see CEED bring together some templates around better practice, what we've called stories of change, and look at a library. So a repository that doesn't just sit there, but connects to the procurement journey so that we can actually see examples of what's worked for people, what maybe hasn't worked so well, and not just the finished product of people's success stories in this area, because we are working in such a changing landscape. So we are thinking about that as a team. We are designing different solutions, which I'll come on to in a second. The other thing that we've been looking at in depth over the last month is capturing and reporting carbon emission data. So we've talked about this alpha as being through the lens of net zero and carbon emissions, decarbonising procurement, so the WPPN 1221. This is a really meaty area for us to dig into in terms of what CEED could offer to support the capturing and reporting of carbon emissions data. And what we found in our conversations and workshops is that there's a huge amount of knowledge out there in people's brains. And sometimes folks don't always realise they know as much as they know, because this landscape is changing so rapidly. And one of the ideas we are playing with as a design team is how Keed might increase the confidence level of procurement and commercial professionals to access resources that help them have better, more engaged, smarter conversations with the whole ecosystem, particularly when it comes to things like contract renewal, for example. And that is played out in one of the service prototypes called Kidrani, which Warren will tell you a little bit more about in a moment. So building on this idea that better practice, stories of change, capturing and reporting data around carbon emissions confidently, we've taken things from conversation, discussion, and playback of what folks have been up to developing prototypes. So we are taking a user-centered design approach to this project, and that means that we are constantly challenging what we think we know about what users want. And one of the best ways to do that is to create visual prototypes that are kind of like rough sketches that we can rip up, tweak, edit, and we don't feel like we've lost a polished product by doing it in this way. So we have been tinkering away behind the scenes on these little screens, which are only a sneak peek. They're not great detail at the moment, but this approach has allowed us as a design team to come up with what we think might be some of the answers to the questions that we're being asked around, well, how do we support the community? How do we build that confidence level at different stages of the procurement journey? And there are a couple of nuggets just dotted around here, like the idea of a toolkit for resources that would help procurement and commercial professionals navigate conversations confidently. So building on some of the questions that are already being asked if you go to preparing a brief on the Welsh Government website, we are looking at how we harness all of those questions into a format that people can use to take action with. So rather than just ask a question without an answer, it becomes a template for action and building confidence as part of the user experience. So these little screenshots that you can see here have all been stitched together in a prototype, which we are going to be testing with the user testing community next week. So if you are a part of that community, then we'll ask you some task-based questions just so that we can test whether what we think we're seeing is what you're seeing, and it actually helps you to get the jobs done that you've told us are really important to you in the context of better practice and stories of change. I should also say that one of the other things we've been up to is exploring case studies in more detail via a survey. So thank you if those of you who are out there have already filled in that survey as part of the user testing community. If not, that survey is live and we can send a reminder to you as part of this show and tell. The questions we're asking in that survey are all around what's important for procurement and commercial professionals when they look for a case study, when they are trying to prioritise the types of stories and information that they need to help them get a job done. So Keed is very much at this stage about curation and not creation of content. And one of the things that we are looking for is submissions of stories of change from the wider community. So not the finished articles. If you are working on something and you are tackling problems, thinking out loud, working in the open, and you'd like to have a chat with us about potentially featuring your story of change or someone else's story of change that you know of, then please do drop in the chat your contact details so that we can get in touch and explore that in more detail. What we would like to do by the end of March, and our aim is to have some of these case studies brought to life in the format that we're designing that you can see on screen so that we can continue to test whether they are as relevant as we are hoping for them to be. So that's our general update of where we've got to. Part of the service that I've mentioned around sharing knowledge is called Kidrani. I'm going to hand over to you, Warren, to take us through that. And as I'm in charge of the screen, I will try and do my best by you on moving slides forward when you ask me to. See how it goes.
Thank you very much, Corey, and Bora da, everybody. My name is Warren Smith, for those who perhaps haven't met me so far. I'm an Associate Director for Kershaw, and as Corey says, we are the other side of the entity that's delivering this phase of the Alpha project. So Keed Rani, this is a new element to Keed, and it's all about how we can help to promote and share knowledge across not only the Welsh public sector networks, but more broadly across the UK and indeed more broadly internationally. How can we learn from other organisations who themselves are on the same kind of journey around procurement reform, as well as understanding how to use procurement to help reduce carbon emissions and to increase capacity and capability within the professions. So we've identified some very interesting opportunities to begin this. So if you could just go on to the next slide, please, Corey. So this is all about, as you say here, supporting good practice and collaboration. We know that there is a whole wealth of information out there, and it's really trying to use that curation approach to identify where people are across the globe on their own journey, and surfacing the insights and the lessons learned from their approaches, and using that as a way of helping to avoid duplication, and as I said, to learn the lessons of others who perhaps are more further down the stream. But also, as Corey says, this is a very complex area, particularly around the emissions reporting on tier 3. So how do we help to for everybody to gain and derive value from quite a changing and complex space in this area? So it'll be initially a webinar series, but we do hope that this could be also face-to-face events, so a hybrid format, and an opportunity to have conversations and to connect with like-minded organisations, officials, and other organisations who are operating in this space. So next slide, please, Corey. So the inaugural session, which we are aiming to launch towards the end of this month, during the week commencing the 20th, we're just pinning down the date at the moment, will be with Gurani Ibarra, who's from the Basque country. She works for a state-owned organisation that's responsible for their sustainable procurement approach. There's a long-standing relationship between Wales and the Basque country, and indeed this engagement supports quite specifically the policy number 14, which is called International Action to Support Decarbonisation at Home and Abroad, which is part of the Welsh Government's Net Zero Wales carbon budget for 2021 to 2025. And that states that the intention is to share our experience and learning through our existing international networks, and by leveraging the 11 international offices and through MOUs with key partners such as the Basque Country, but also Brittany and Quebec. So we've also started to, as part of our international outreach, to engage with other organisations and countries that form part of that international network. So the format of these events will be roughly about an hour. And we'll line up speakers who are prepared to share their insights and lessons learned. So I'm very excited by the opportunity for Gurani to join us on the inaugural session. They've just come to the end of an initial phase of their program and have a bunch of lessons learned that they'd like to share with the community, and how those lessons have been used to then inform the next stage of their program towards their 2030 agenda. So information about this will be published soon, and registrations will open soon. So yeah, please do get involved, and I think this will be an excellent opportunity to learn from a key strategic ally and partner such as the Basque Country here. So next slide, please, Corey.
I think that might be you. Done,
okay.
Lauren. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So what I will do now is just pause for breath here. If anyone has any thoughts or questions around the general update or around Cydrani, then please raise your hand now or drop them in the chat, and we can have a discussion before I hand over to Angharad. Go for it.
Yes, I think it's really positive to see the international connection. Europe in particular is forging ahead in sustainable procurement, and very much diverging from where the United Kingdom is in some aspects, as it begins to respond to the United States investment in green infrastructure and what we've termed in the UK in the past the Green New Deal, and the implications all that has for procurement. So I think there's potentially a lot of very good practice that we can learn from here in Wales, from both Europe and North America. It actually it's a really exciting development. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Alan. The other types of feedback that's always useful for us to, as we launch a service like Cydrani, is things like the time of the event. Obviously, we're planning to make it accessible on multiple platforms and channels, as we do with the user testing session. So if you can't attend a testing session when we have the sessions live, then we also have asynchronous testing. So this is a key part of what we've baked in to the approach to Cyd, is to make it flexible, because again, the key message coming through from discovery all the way through alpha is the community is incredibly pressured by all this complex change that's happening. And so, you know, if we miss a trick there and you think actually there's another way that we could do this, then please let us know, because it's always great to have that feedback as we launch into a programme. And obviously the key being to keep that programme sustainable and filled with rich, exciting and interactive content that's of value to the wider community. If there are no further questions or comments, then I will hand over to Angharad. We're going to do a double act here, because at one point I'm going to have to stop sharing this screen and start sharing a screen so we can show you what the website looks like. So Angharad, you might need to bear with me as I wrangle technology for you this afternoon.
Yeah, dim problem. Diolch, Cori. I'm going to use a bit of Welsh and English in my presentation, but don't worry, if you're not a Welsh speaker, I will be saying something similar in both languages. So I hope you've noticed that we now have a fresh new brand for Cyd, which will be used on all material from now on. Mae wedi greu yn dilyn ymgynghori efo chi'r gymuned gaffael yma yng Nghymru, a gobeithio fod yn plesio. Since our last show and tell, we've also been working on a new website for Cyd. So next slide, please, Cori. Felly safle dros dro fydd hwn, fydd yn gartre i'n blog ar wybodaeth am y digwyddiadau yn y lle cyntaf, a mi fydd yn fyw o dechrau wsos nesaf. So this will be a temporary website and will be used mainly to house our blogs and as an information point for our Cyd events. It's not live yet, but will be by next week. I will now give you a preview of the site. So if you can share the site with me, let me know when it's up.
I am about to do that. I think, as usual, Teams has decided to have a malfunction at the key point. Here we go.
Is it there?
It's telling me it's there. Hopefully,
Yep, I can see it.
Everyone else.
Lovely. So you'll see that we have a tab for our events, and that is where you will find information on sign-ups for our events, such as the user testing group, these show and tell sessions, and the new Cydrani webinar series that Warren mentioned. You'll also see that the blogs that used to be on the Welsh Government's digital blog site will now be hosted here. And of course, you can also find information about how to contact us. Felly, mi welwch chi fod y wefan yn cynnwys yr holl wybodaeth ddiweddara am Cyd, a dyma fydd y lle i chi fynd i ddysgu am unrhyw ddatblygiadau wrth i'r prosiect yma fynd yn ei flaen. It will be live from next week, so you can have a proper look then yourselves and go through it and read our blogs and so on. So if we can go back to the presentation, Corey.
Thank you. I will attempt to make that happen.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Felly mi fyddwn ni rwan yn symud i gam 2 ac yn datblygu'r wefan ymhellach i gynnwys 3 maes gwasanaeth ydych chi wedi deitha ni bod chi ehangan nhw. So we will now move on to phase 2 of the website, which will be an interactive site focused on the content that you've told us that you need and aligned with the new procurement route map that is being produced within Welsh Government. Felly cofiwch gadw golwg ar y wefan o wsos nesaf ymlaen. Next slide, please. We hope that our temporary site and social channels will be up and running by next week. So please visit us on cyd.cymru and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn with the handle @cydcymru. Does anybody have any questions about the new site or the new brand or anything that I've mentioned?
Got a couple of comments in the chat, Angharad, from Jane and Helen.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Helen. Will be nice to see everything in one place. Easier for everyone to see. Thank you, Jane. I hope you saw the slides. I'm seeing comments now that people couldn't see the slides. Did it work in the end?
It was just temporary, Angharad. Yeah, Corey brought them back. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, hopefully by Monday, if you go to cyd.cymru, the site will be up and running and the social media channels. So please follow us.
Thanks, Angharad. So any further thoughts for discussion around anything that we have talked through today? There is quite a lot going on, albeit we've covered things off as usual in a whistle-stop fashion. It doesn't show a lot of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, as you can imagine, looking at some of the technical considerations around the Cyd site. One of the things that we are very conscious of is what we are building now is not going to remain the same for very long, and certainly not into the future. So building a temporary site, as Angharad said, is exactly the approach of prototyping, testing, growing, but we are having conversations with our technical colleagues all the time to make sure components can be added, that things can be flexible as we build out the services, that Cyd becomes the home for that. So that is something that is forefront in our heads as we build and develop Cyd for the future too. Yeah, that's a question that's come up in the chat about whether it's live yet. So we are constantly adding to this. So when we launch, the channels will go live next week too, and you can give them a follow, which always feels like a cheesy thing to say, but I have to say it anyway. So thank you in advance for your engagement on social media. Okay, if there are no other questions around what we've presented today, then just a kind of quick reminder from me around the actual engagement session that is happening next Wednesday. So if you are not part of the user testing group yet, then we can drop a link in the chat to that, Angharad, if that's possible, if you haven't signed up yet, because even if you haven't been involved in the previous sessions that have led up to this point, we are now getting into some of the granular detail of what the service will look like when it goes live on digital platforms. And it may be that this is the time that you'd like to jump in. The prototyping testing, we will have an in-person moderated session next week, but we will also have access to the prototype testing asynchronously. So this is testing that you can do, 10 minutes or so in your own time, and all that feedback is incredibly valuable to us as we build out this service towards the end of March and beyond. So just another plug for that group, which is a very vibrant community. I think we have about 80 folks on there at the moment, and it's growing all of the time. I don't know if you can get that link up, Angharad, whether you're desperately trying to find it.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm having trouble at the moment, but I will post it in the chats for this session afterwards, if that's okay, and we can all access that afterwards. If you can check there for me, that would be ideal.
That's perfect. Thank you. I hate putting people under pressure to find links as we are live and chatting, so that would be fantastic. The only other thing to say then is obviously keep an eye out for the website as it launches next week, and we will be in touch around the user testing sessions that are upcoming. Also Cydrani, obviously, when the registration announcement goes out for Cydrani, then please feel free to sign up and tell your colleagues, because that in itself will be a test of this concept in terms of how it's received and how the community engages with it. So thank you very much, diolch everyone, for your time this afternoon. I will call it a day there, and I will see you all at our next show and tell, which again will be in about a month's time.
Thank you.